The cabin pressure changed at 31,000 feet, and I felt it in my jaw first. That familiar ache from clenching my teeth through another conference call. Outside the window, nothing but darkness, and the blinking red light on the wingtip. Below us, somewhere in that void, the lights of Indianapolis probably twinkled like scattered diamonds. I wouldn't know. I'd stopped looking at cities from above years ago. They all looked the same when you were passing through. My name is Sean. I'm 40 years old. For 15 years, I've been the guy who closes the deals nobody else can touch. High-rise commercial properties in gateway cities. The kind of transactions that make the front page of Crane's Chicago Business. The kind that require 3 law firms, 2 months of due diligence, and exactly one person willing to fly to LA on a Tuesday and be back in New York by Thursday morning. That person was always me. I knew the tail number of every jet in the Collins and Associates fleet. N622CA, the Citation, the Workhorse, the one I was sitting in right now, returning to Chicago from a disaster in Miami that I'd somehow turned into a $340 million win. I'd spent more time in these pressurized tubes than in my own living room on Michigan Avenue. My phone buzzed against the mahogany armrest. A text from Mariah. "Dinner's in the fridge. Don't work too late. Love you." I smiled, despite the exhaustion radiating through my shoulders. Mariah, my wife, my anchor. A stunning black American woman with skin like warm honey and a mind that could dissect a marketing strategy faster than I could read a pro forma. She'd worked alongside me at Collins and Associates for 3 years before we started dating, back when she was the VP of brand strategy and I was just another ambitious associate trying to make partner. We'd been the power couple of the Gold Coast, the kind of pair that made other couples at charity galas lean in and whisper.
For 6 years of marriage, our penthouse had everything money could buy. Viking appliances we rarely used, a wine collection we barely touched, original artwork on walls we hardly noticed. Everything except the one thing that mattered, a child. 6 years of specialists and consultations at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. 6 years of Mariah's face falling every month. 6 years of me booking another flight to somewhere else because I didn't know how to sit with that kind of grief. The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin speakers. "Mr. Sean will be landing at O'Hare in approximately 12 minutes. I thought about the baby. 3 months along now. The ultrasound picture tucked in my wallet. The nursery we'd started planning in the spare bedroom. For the first time in 15 years, I'd thought maybe all of it had been worth it. The red eyes, the missed birthdays, the hotel rooms and cities I couldn't remember. But in my business, you learn one thing early. Never sign a contract without reading the fine print. And as the wheels touched down on the rain-slick runway, I had no idea that everything I'd built was about to collapse. The memory of that night 3 months ago still felt like a dream. I'd been in London for a week, drowning in the Canary Wharf acquisition. When I finally stumbled through our front door past midnight, Mariah was waiting in the kitchen, backlit by the pendant lights over the island. And she didn't say a word, just held up that white plastic stick with 2 pink lines. I dropped my Toomey bag right there on the Italian marble. The sound echoed through our penthouse like a gunshot. When I pulled her into my arms, something unlocked in my chest, something I didn't even know had been welded shut by 6 years of negative pregnancy tests and sympathetic looks from fertility specialists. "We're going to be parents," I'd whispered into her hair, and she cried, and I cried, and the skyline of Chicago glittered through our floor-to-ceiling windows like it was celebrating with us.
The next night, I'd taken her to Gibson's Steakhouse on Rush Street. Prime rib and lobster tail. A bottle of sparkling cider for her. 18-year Macallan for me. The kind of meal that cost more than my father made in a week, doing electrical work in Bridgeport. I'd ordered it all without looking at the menu, because that's what you do when you're celebrating a miracle. Mariah had worn a black dress that hugged her still flat stomach, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the low light. She was radiant. Everyone in the restaurant kept glancing at our table, and I'd felt like the luckiest man in Chicago. Maybe the luckiest man alive. I can't believe it's real, after everything. It's real, and I'm going to be different now. I'm going to be here, present, the kind of father who doesn't miss anything. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't read, something that flickered and disappeared before I could name it. I chalked it up to hormones, to the overwhelming nature of finally getting what we'd wanted for so long. Looking back now, I wonder if that flicker was guilt. The red flag came 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when I should have been sleeping off another cross-country flight. I'd gotten back from L.A. the night before, another deal closed, another commission that would fund the college account I'd already opened for our unborn child. Mariah was at her Pilates class in Lincoln Park, and I was unpacking my suitcase when I found it. A receipt, tucked into the corner of my dresser drawer, half hidden beneath my cufflinks. Breitling Navitimer, $18,000. Purchased at the boutique on Oak Street 4 weeks ago. I stood there in our bedroom, the receipt between my fingers, and felt my pulse kick up. I didn't wear Breitling. I wore Patek Philippe, the Nautilus, a gift from Craig when I'd made partner 5 years ago. Mariah knew my taste. She'd never buy me something so ostentatiously masculine, so aggressively expensive in a way that screamed insecurity rather than success. I checked the date again. 4 weeks ago. I'd been in New York for the entire week, negotiating the acquisition of a residential tower in Tribeca. My hands started to shake. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a gift for a client, a purchase she was handling for someone at the office, maybe even a surprise for Craig's birthday. Mariah still did consulting work for Collins and Associates occasionally, handling special projects and brand initiatives. Craig's birthday. His name was Marcus Webb, a former Chicago PD detective who now worked exclusively for divorce attorneys and corporate espionage cases. We met in his office in a nondescript building on South Wabash, the kind of place where the elevator smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. He didn't ask questions beyond the basics. He just took Mariah's photo, Craig's name, and my retainer check. Give me a week. If there's something to find, I'll find it. It took him 4 days. I was at the office when he called, 77 West Wacker Drive, 40th floor, sitting in my glass-walled office overlooking the Chicago River. The spring sun was turning the water into hammered silver, and I was reviewing acquisition models when my personal cell buzzed. "Mr. Sean, it's Marcus. You gonna want to see this in person." An hour later, I was back in his office, watching surveillance footage on a laptop that looked like it had survived a war. The timestamp showed last Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. The location was unmistakable. My building, our building, the one on North State Parkway where Mariah and I had lived for 6 years. The footage showed Craig Collins entering the lobby. He was wearing a suit I recognized, Tom Ford, Navy, the one he saved for board meetings. He didn't look around, didn't hesitate. He walked to the elevator bank like he'd done it 100 times before. Marcus clicked to another file. Same building, same angle, different day. Craig again, this time with a brown bag from Italy. Another click, another click. Craig leaving at 6:15 p.m., loosening his tie. How many days? I asked. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. 17 visits in the last 8 weeks. Always when you're traveling. Always stays between 2 and 4 hours. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. Craig's face caught mid-stride, a slight smile on his lips. The math was simple, brutal, irrefutable. I'd been in London 8 weeks ago. I told Mariah I needed a DNA sample for some genetic testing the doctor had recommended. Carrier screening for cystic fibrosis, I'd said. Standard procedure now that we were finally expecting. She nodded, distracted, scrolling through her phone while I swabbed the inside of her cheek with the kit I'd ordered online. You're being so responsible. I love that about you. I smiled and sealed the sample in the envelope. Then I went to the office early the next morning and used my executive access card to enter before the cleaning crew left. Craig's office was on the 45th floor, corner U, the kind of space that screamed power. I found what I needed in his private bathroom, a toothbrush, expensive German bristles, still damp from that morning.
The lab was in Naperville, far enough from downtown that no one I knew would ever walk through its doors. I paid in cash, used a fake name. The technician, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, promised results in 5 business days. Those 5 days were the longest of my life. I went to work, closed a $200 million deal in Minneapolis, attended a prenatal appointment at Northwestern Memorial, where the ultrasound tech showed us the baby's heartbeat, that flickering light on the screen that was supposed to mean everything. Mariah had squeezed my hand and cried happy tears, and I'd sat there, wondering whose DNA was creating that tiny beating heart. The results came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office when the encrypted email arrived. I made myself finish the conference call I was on, made myself review the contract I'd been reading, made myself pour a glass of water from the mini-fridge before I opened the attachment. The report was clinical, precise, devastating. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I sat there in my leather chair, overlooking the river where tour boats full of tourists were gliding past, and felt something fundamental crack inside my chest. Not my heart, that would come later. This was deeper. This was the foundation of my entire life, developing fault lines. Craig Collins was the father of Mariah's baby, my wife, my mentor, my child that wasn't mine. I closed the laptop and stared at the river until the sun set and the city lights came on. And then I started planning. If you made it this far, you're one of the few who truly listens. Please subscribe. It's how these stories survive and how this channel grows. Because this story, we're just getting started. The week that followed was a masterclass in self-control. I woke up next to Mariah every morning and kissed her forehead. I asked about her pregnancy symptoms, the morning sickness, the fatigue, the food cravings. I rubbed her feet while we watched television. I discussed paint colors for the nursery we'd never used together. At night, I held her while she slept, feeling her breathing slow and even against my chest. And I thought about Craig's hands on her body, Craig's voice in her ear, Craig's child growing inside her while I flew across the country building his empire. On Tuesday, we had another appointment at Northwestern Memorial. The obstetrician, Dr. Patel, was a kind woman in her 60s who'd seen us through years of failed attempts. Now she beamed at us like she was her personal success story. Everything looks perfect. Strong heartbeat, right on schedule for 14 weeks. 14 weeks. I did the math automatically. London, the Canary Wharf deal, the week I'd missed our anniversary. Would you like to know the sex? Not yet. We want to wait. I nodded and smiled. Whatever she wants. In the parking garage afterwards, Mariah turned to me, her hand on my arm. You seem distant lately. Is everything okay with work? For a moment, I almost told her, almost laid it all out right there between the concrete pillars and the fluorescent lights. But I'd learned patience in this business. I'd learned that the best negotiations happened when the other party didn't know you held all the cards. Just tired. Big deal closing next month. She kissed my cheek. You work too hard, but it'll be different when the baby comes, right?
Right. Everything will be different. And it would be. Just not in the way she imagined. At the office, I smiled at Craig during meetings, laughed at his jokes, accepted his praise for the Minneapolis acquisition. We had lunch at the Capitol Grill, discussing the Seattle portfolio. And I watched him cut his steak and thought about how easily a knife slides through meat when you know exactly where to apply pressure. You seem focused. Fatherhood suits you already. I'm motivated. I want to build something that lasts. He raised his glass. To legacy. I clinked my glass against his. To legacy. That night, I stayed late at the office after everyone left. And I began transferring files. For 15 years, I'd been Craig Collins' Bolden boy. I'd closed deals he couldn't close, built relationships with clients who trusted me more than they trusted the firm. In commercial real estate, loyalty follows the relationship, not the letterhead. I'd learned that from Craig himself. Over the next week, I worked late every night. Mariah thought I was preparing for the Seattle portfolio presentation. She'd bring me dinner sometimes, kissing me goodbye at the elevator bank, her hand resting on her growing stomach. I'd watch her leave, and then get back to work. I created a shell corporation, SRM Holdings. Sean Robert Morrison, my full name hidden in plain sight. Delaware registration, clean paperwork, a business address at a virtual office in River North. Then I started making calls. The Reinhardt Group in Minneapolis. They'd wanted to work with me exclusively since the $200 million close. One call, one dinner, one handshake. They were mine. The Seattle portfolio. One lunch, one walk, one conversation. They were mine. The Pacific Tower Holdings in LA. We'd built trust over 3 years and 4 major acquisitions. They didn't care about Collins and Associates. They cared about me. The Toronto Consortium. The Miami developers. The private equity firm in Boston sitting on $800 million in dry powder. One by one, I contacted them. Quiet conversations, hypothetical scenarios. What if I went independent? Would they follow? They would. They all would. I documented everything meticulously, saved every email to an encrypted drive, copied every contract, every client list, every proprietary deal structure I'd developed over 15 years. The intellectual property that had made Collins and Associates dominant in the Midwest market, most of it came from my mind, my work, my sleepless nights in hotel rooms from coast to coast. Craig had taken my wife. I was taking his company. The gala was scheduled for 3 weeks away, the Chicago Commercial Real Estate Awards,
held annually at the Radisson Blu Aqua Hotel. Black tie. 500 of the city's most powerful developers, investors, and deal-makers. This year, I was receiving the Consultant of the Year award. Craig himself would be presenting it. I'd accepted the honor 2 months ago, back when I still believed I had a family to celebrate with. Now, it would serve a different purpose. The final preparations. Saturday morning routine. I wrote my speech on a Saturday morning while Mariah was at prenatal yoga. I revised it 7 times, cutting every ounce of emotion, leaving only cold precision. Then I printed 2 copies, one for me, one for Craig, and sealed the second in an envelope along with the DNA results. The stage was set, the trap was ready, and Craig Collins had no idea what was coming. If you made it this far, you're one of the few who truly listens. Please subscribe. It's how these stories survive and how this channel grows. Next episode, the gala, bold and clear, April in Chicago. The kind of evening where the wind off the lake cuts through even the finest wool. Mariah wore a navy gown that accommodated her now visible pregnancy, her hair swept up, those same diamond earrings catching the light. She looked beautiful. She looked happy. I'm so proud of you, Consultant of the Year, everything you've worked for. I squeezed her hand and said nothing. The Radisson Blu Aqua Ballroom glittered with Chicago's commercial real estate elite. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, tables draped in white linen. I recognized faces from every major deal in the city, the developers who'd built the skyline, the investors who'd funded it, the attorneys who'd papered it all. 500 people who'd come to celebrate success and network over filet mignon. Craig found me at the bar, resplendent in his tuxedo, a Breitling catching the light on his wrist. The same watch Mariah had bought him. Big night. You've earned this, Sean. 15 years of excellence. Couldn't have done it without your mentorship. We make a good team. He glanced across the room at Mariah, who was talking with a group of wives. Something flickered in his expression. Possessiveness, maybe, or guilt. You're a lucky man. I know exactly what I have. Dinner was served. Speeches were made. Awards were presented. I sat at the head table between Mariah and Craig, cutting my steak into precise pieces I couldn't taste, nodding at jokes I didn't hear. The envelope sat in my jacket's inner pocket, a weight against my heart. Finally, Craig stood to introduce me. The ballroom quieted. 500 faces turned toward the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to present this year's Consultant of the Year Award to a man who embodies everything we value in this industry: dedication, excellence, loyalty. Sean Morrison has been instrumental in building Collins & Associates into what it is today. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage. The applause was thunderous. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward my reckoning. The stage lights were hot. The microphone stood at the podium like a confessional. I shook Craig's hand. Firm grip, eye contact, the performance we'd perfected over 15 years. He handed me the crystal trophy, and I set it down carefully before pulling my speech from my pocket. Thank you, Craig. Thank you all. My voice carried through the ballroom, amplified and clear. 15 years ago, I walked into Collins & Associates as a 25-year-old kid who thought he knew everything about commercial real estate. Craig taught me I knew nothing. He taught me how to read a deal,
how to build relationships, how to close transactions that seemed impossible. I paused for polite laughter. He also taught me something else. He taught me that in this business, you have to verify everything, every asset, every liability, every number on every page of every contract, because if you don't, you'll sign something that destroys you. I paused. The room was fully attentive now. I could see Craig's smile beginning to falter.
3 months ago, my wife told me we were expecting our first child. After 6 years of trying, it felt like a miracle. I was ready to be a father, ready to build a legacy. But I learned to verify my assets, so I ran the numbers. I opened the envelope and removed the DNA results. These are the results of a paternity test. According to this lab report, I am not the father of my wife's child. The ballroom went silent. Absolute. The kind of silence where you can hear ice melting in glasses. The biological father is Craig Collins. Someone gasped. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. I kept my eyes on Craig, watching the blood drain from his face. Inside this envelope, you'll also find my resignation from Collins and Associates, effective immediately, along with a list of clients who've chosen to follow me to my new firm. I placed the envelope on the podium. Consider it my final delivery. I looked out at the sea of faces, shock, horror, fascination, some struggling not to smile at the spectacle. I'm told this award recognizes dedication and loyalty. I've been dedicated to the wrong people, so I'm taking back what's mine, my time, my work, my dignity.
I picked up the crystal trophy. Craig, this belongs to you more than me. After all, you've earned it. I set it in front of him and walked off the stage. Behind me, the ballroom erupted. I didn't look back. Not at Craig, frozen at the podium. Not at Mariah, who I heard calling my name above the chaos. Not at the 500 witnesses to the detonation of my old life. I walked through the lobby, past the valets, and into the April night. My car was waiting where I'd parked it that morning, a black Audi A8, the one indulgence I'd allowed myself over the years. I'd removed everything personal from the penthouse the night before while Mariah slept. 2 suitcases, my grandfather's watch, the Northwestern diploma my father had framed. Everything else could burn. I drove north on Lakeshore Drive with the windows down, the cold air burning my lungs. The skyline rose to my left, those towers I'd helped fill, those deals I'd closed, that empire I'd built for a man who'd been sleeping with my wife. The lake stretched black and infinite to my right, and somewhere out there in the darkness was the horizon I'd been chasing for 15 years. My phone was ringing. Mariah, Craig, unknown numbers, probably reporters, maybe attorneys. I turned it off and threw it on the passenger seat. At Montrose Harbor, I pulled over and sat with the engine running. Through the windshield, I could see the city lights reflected on the water, fractured and beautiful. In my rearview mirror, everything I'd been, disappearing into the distance. I thought about my father, the union electrician from Bridgeport who'd worked honest jobs for honest pay and died with nothing but his dignity. He'd warned me once about men like Craig Collins. They'll take everything if you let them, your time, your life, your soul. He'd been right, but he'd also taught me that you don't let anyone take what you won't give. I didn't look back, not at Craig, frozen at the podium, not at Mariah, who I heard calling my name above the chaos,
not at the 500 witnesses to the detonation of my old life. I walked through the lobby, past the valets, and into the April night. My car was waiting where I'd parked it that morning, a black Audi A8, the one indulgence I'd allowed myself over the years. I'd removed everything personal from the penthouse the night before while Mariah slept. 2 suitcases, my grandfather's watch, the Northwestern diploma my father had framed. Everything else could burn. I drove north on Lakeshore Drive with the windows down, the cold air burning my lungs. The skyline rose to my left, those towers I'd helped fill, those deals I'd closed, that empire I'd built for a man who'd been sleeping with my wife. The lake stretched black and infinite to my right, and somewhere out there in the darkness was the horizon I'd been chasing for 15 years. My phone was ringing. Mariah, Craig, unknown numbers, probably reporters, maybe attorneys. I turned it off and threw it on the passenger seat. At Montrose Harbor, I pulled over and sat with the engine running. Through the windshield, I could see the city lights reflected on the water, fractured and beautiful. In my rearview mirror, everything I'd been disappearing into the distance. I thought about my father, the union electrician from Bridgeport who'd worked honest jobs for honest pay and died with nothing but his dignity. He'd warned me once about men like Craig Collins. They'll take everything if you let 'em, your time, your life, your soul. He'd been right, but he'd also taught me that you don't let anyone take what you won't give.
I'd given Craig 15 years. He'd taken my wife, my child that wasn't mine, my belief that hard work and loyalty meant something. But I'd taken his company, his reputation, his future. We were even now, more than even. I put the car in drive and headed toward the Wisconsin border, toward a smaller city where I'd already rented an office, where my new firm was waiting, where clients who valued integrity over pedigree were ready to sign contracts. Chicago disappeared in my mirrors, and I didn't mourn it. Somewhere behind me, Craig was explaining himself to a ballroom full of witnesses. Mariah was realizing the penthouse keys wouldn't work. The life we'd built was collapsing like a controlled demolition. And I was free. I'd lost a wife and a career in 60 seconds, but I'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that I could burn it all down and walk away standing. So I'll ask you this. If you'd spent 15 years building a man's empire while he was destroying your life, would you have walked away quietly? Or would you have made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man signs his name to another man's child? I chose the fire, and I'd choose it again. If you made it this far, you're one of the few who truly listens. Please subscribe. It's how these stories survive and how this channel grows. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes, the only way out is through the flames.